And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Monday, November 15th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories right here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. And here are the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and a few other Native news sources. Representatives from Wisconsin's 11 federally recognized tribes, Federal Highway Administration and Wisconsin Department of Transportation Secretary Frank Buzalashi joined at the state capitol in Madison, Wisconsin last week to commemorate the historic WisDOT Tribal Partnership Agreement, originally signed in May of 2005. Although the spirit of the agreement remains focused on partnership and mutual respect, the revised agreement now includes measurable goals and outlines other transportation initiatives designed to strengthen both state and tribal economies. The partnership agreement is an extension of the Governor's Executive Order number 39, which is an affirmation of the government-to-government relationship between the state of Wisconsin and native tribal governments located in Wisconsin. The agreement promotes partnership between the state and tribes on transportation-related issues. American Indians have won some key victories in Congress this year and should capitalize on them to start solving some of the problems that have plagued tribal communities for decades, said the leader of the oldest and the largest Indian organization in the United States. Jefferson Keel, president of the National Congress of American Indians, said tribal leaders should keep the momentum going following successes such as the Tribal Law and Order Act, recently signed into law by President Barack Obama, and the Indian Health Care Improvement Act, reauthorized as part of the large health care reform passed by Congress. He also cited a $680 million settlement the government has offered to American Indians who were denied farm loans to settle a 1999 lawsuit. Keel and other leaders from throughout Indian country are gathered in Albuquerque this week for the organization's annual conference. They will focus on raising awareness among Congress's new members and the challenge faced by tribal communities. American Indian farmers and ranchers can get information on a class action lawsuit settlement with the federal government during a meeting in Bismarck. The November 22nd meeting is scheduled at United Tribes Technical College. There, it will be conducted by the lead plaintiffs and their attorneys in Keeps Eagle versus Valsac lawsuit, which alleged that Indian farmers were denied farm loans. United Tribes says the meeting will include a briefing session without provisions of the settlement, a briefing session about the provisions of the settlement and claims process. The settlement calls for the federal government to pay $680 million in damages to thousands of American Indian farmers and ranchers nationwide. And today we talk with Shoshone Bannock tribal member Mark Trahant, who has our back in the wheeling and dealing to resolve the country's debt and what Indian country might be facing. He is the sacred earned income credit used by many Native families about to go the way of educational and health care needs as proposed by the Tea Party Republicans. Let's find out what Mark thinks.
Mark Trahant, we're talking a little bit about what Indian country and the middle class and the U.S. in general might face under the Republican Congress that's coming in here in January, and people are already posturing. I know they have a lame duck going on, but it doesn't seem like that session is going to accomplish much. Seems like everyone's kind of getting ready for the impact of the Tea Party and sharpening their knife. What can you tell me about what might be going under the scalpel?
Well, even before the Republicans start with their scalpel, there's the Presidential Commission on Debt. And they're charged to release their report on December 1st, but they've already floated a couple trial balloons this week and are trying to get reaction. They want to cut three out of every, for every new dollar of revenue, they would cut three. So it'd be pretty substantial budget cuts. They would change the tax code to try to simplify it, but also increase taxes. And they would increase the age of retirement eventually to 69. For people who want to retire under Social Security. So they're kind of taking it. Right now it's 67 and a half. The one for me that just blew me out of the water and I jumped on all over in my column today is the Earned Income Tax Credit. Now, one of the dirty little secrets is 70% 90% of Americans pay more in payroll tax than they pay in income tax. In fact, 10% don't pay any income tax. They just pay payroll tax. Payroll tax is money that comes out of your check for Social Security, Medicare, that sort of thing. It's across the board. It impacts everybody. If you're self-employed like I am, you get to pay both ends of it, so you get to basically double. And on the low income, it's a very onerous tax. Well, going back to the Nixon administration, but then expanded under Bush, was the idea that let's give the working poor some of that money back, and let's just do it directly for people who work, but give them some money back from payroll tax, and that's the Earned Income Tax Credit. It affects families with children, really hits single women.
It's tax that you can get back more than you paid in at times as well because of the way it works.
Only income tax. I mean, that's the thing is people say, well, you're just giving money away to poor people, but that's not correct because they will have paid more than that in payroll tax. Okay. It's just income tax you get a credit for. Okay. So, yeah, you get a check back. It's real cash that you can take at the end of the year and spend on things you've been waiting all year for. It can be like $3,000.
Right. And my familiarity with it is that it's the one exemption or credit or however you want to call that seems to be universally used for anyone who has a child, right, or children.
Right. If your income's low enough, right. But
okay.
It's across the board. It's very versatile. If you like, for example, even if you have a low income but you make a lot of money from investments, you're not eligible. I mean, this is really designed for the working poor.
Okay.
It's the most successful anti-poverty program in the history of government. I mean, it really has worked. It's been very effective. People use the money to pay down bills, to spend, to buy things, right. Save up for a car at the end of the year.
Very, very. In fact, a lot of people use the tax system as a savings account in a way. You're right about it. Used to buy something because they know they have that coming. This is a bipartisan committee made up of known Republican and Democratic economic fiscal people.
Right, fiscal hawks. Chaired by Clinton's former chiefs of staff, Erskine Bowles, and the former senator from Wyoming, Alan Simpson.
And they threw a few things on the table that seems to be unpalatable to both sides. There are people who are praising parts of it and people who are criticizing it from both sides. So it may mean that there's something there that's workable, maybe.
Maybe. So far, the Democrats have said they don't like some of the Social Security proposals. And Republicans hate the idea of defense cuts. I haven't seen a lot yet on this earned income tax credit. I'm probably the first one to jump on it.
Right, indeed. Another one has to do with the mortgage interest deduction, which people moving out of HUD home rentals and other things that are based on your wages and salaries. There's sometimes when people get into a HUD home, they're renting it at a low subsidized rate. Both mom and dad end up getting jobs. All of a sudden, they're paying out 40%. They decide to buy their first home, and now they're paying a mortgage, but interest is deductible too. So I'm familiar with that because I'm a homeowner. What else are you seeing on that might be blocked out, and where does Indian country come into the discussion?
Okay, well, first, one more thing about the earned income tax credit in Indian country is I pulled up a map of the zip codes that where there are high numbers of people taking earned income tax credit, and it's a map of Indian reservations. I mean, the clearest one I saw was Montana, but South Dakota is the same, where every red dot on the map, which is people who are more than 40% use the earned income tax credit, are Montana's 7 reservations. And so that one thing will impact Indian country in a huge way, and it'll be working primarily when trying to make it by. Mortgage, I think, actually has a lot less impact in Indian country. I think most people don't take that. They just do the standard deduction because it's a lot less paperwork. You don't have to prove everything. The interest right now is so low anyway that you're not running up a lot in interest. So I think the case is stronger for getting rid of that one. And it would affect more middle-class people who buy more home than they can afford anyway. Right. I mean, it's people with $500,000 and $600,000 and $700,000 homes that really benefit from that.
And the reason most people don't itemize, in part, is they don't have a lot of things they can itemize. In part, one of the other big chunks that gets you to that threshold where you start itemizing it is health and medical care that's deductible. In Indian country, with people going to IHS, if they're in a HUD rental, then there's literally no reason to use any other of these kinds of exemptions and so forth. So
that's correct.
You're right. What else are you seeing on that suggestions?
Well, we'll see. The next few weeks when they actually release the report, the president has said keep an open mind, and I think we need to do something about the debt, but I don't think we need to do it all at once. And I really worry about cutting across the board, because particularly in Indian country, there's so much impact on government that we're going to feel it first, and we're just going to have less money. And in a way, it's almost a sad joke that recessions don't hit Indian country the way they hit everybody else, because it's always like this.
Right.
And
however, budget cutting to constrain the deficit might hit Indian country pretty drastically.
Exactly.
There's taxes proposed in this as well. They're saying you got to reduce spending, but we got to raise taxes. That's part of what's not palatable to some of the Republicans. They say there has to be some adjustments in taxes and levies, and maybe it's just calling them taxes rather than levies and assessments and raising money through fees and stuff like that. Where else do you see Indian country being impacted? And does Indian country and its leadership, are you going to see them advocating for or against any of this stuff? Are you going to see American Indians anywhere in this debate?
I hope so. I think they haven't in the past jumped into this because it's so broad, but in terms of tax policy and such, but I think they ought to. And I'll tell you one example. Deep within the report is a recommendation to eliminate the abandoned mine programs. That's something most people wouldn't think of, but it impacts a lot of tribes that have abandoned mines on the reservation, that have a fixed cost that they have to deal with. And to have that money go away is going to mean the tribe's going to have to pick up the difference. So I think there is a stake in all of this.
And had health care consequences for uranium miners and other people drinking contaminated water in the past.
Sure.
Well, Mark, if you were sitting in the driver's seat, where would you go with all this?
I don't know. I think this is one where it's a real test for democracy, because part of the problem is demographics, and we just have a much older population than we've ever had before in history. And how do you navigate through that, I think, is part of the discussion. You can't keep paying the benefits that we're paying to the generation that's older now. So clearly you've got to start cutting for younger people. At what point you cut them is another issue. They're talking now about holding harmless anyone older than 55, which just cuts me out.
Well, I'm not even going to discuss where I'm at in that formula. Listen, this is my idea, Mark. I think we could probably really take a big chunk of the deficit away if there was like a 5-cent tax on every piece of fry bread that's ever been served.
There you go.
We got to be innovative here, okay? We'll talk to you again soon about some of this stuff when we see the debate going and see where the cuts are coming. We're going to have to get back to you, see what's going on. You're going to go to Washington, D.C. and watch some of this stuff in the future.
Yeah, I'll be there in December.
We want to be there with you, Mark. Thanks for joining with us today.
See ya.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian country. On this edition of the Native News Update, we want to say miigwech for showing up. Come back again soon.